complete siege of Gaza is now underway, saying there's no food, water or fuel being supplied to the Gaza Strip. A spokesman for the Israeli Defense Force, meanwhile, saying fighting within Israel itself has now ceased, but you can still see some of the smoke there rising over the Gaza Strip. Sources in the United States suggesting there may be an Israeli ground incursion into Gaza within the next 48 hours, but nothing official being said on that.
Casualties are continuing to rise on both sides. Latest figures put the Israeli death toll at more than 700 and more than 500 in the Gaza Strip. In response to the continuing bloodshed, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, says he will chair a Cobra emergency response meeting later today. Well, let's get the thoughts now of the director of Maidenhead Synagogue, Rabbi Jonathan Romain. Jonathan, good afternoon to you. Your thoughts today with Israel and Hamas being at war?
Oh, it's desperately sad. And not only that, it just seems so pointless. And it's not going to achieve anything, the Hamas attack on Israel, other than create widows and orphans. And we are largely talking about civilians. I mean, as you probably saw and GB viewers noticed from the Hamas videos, which they themselves released, Hamas wasn't attacking military depots. It wasn't attacking Israeli military. It was largely attacking civilians, and that festival, that rave that was going on. In fact, in capturing hostages as well. So it's appalling on a human level, but of course on a political level, it's not going to achieve anything. In fact, quite the reverse. It's going to set back the course of peace. And although it's a difficult area, actually we were inching towards a peace solution, not an immediate one, but Israel was at peace and made these peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan some time ago. Last year there was the Abrahamic Accord 2 years ago with other Arab countries, Bahrain, Morocco, and as you well know, there was a peace deal with Saudi Arabia actually in discussion. And this is just going to knock that out of the sky. Or maybe, who knows, maybe it was a deliberate attempt to derail that. But whatever
Jonathan, I'm just going to interrupt you. We're just seeing some more black smoke rising on the skyline there with our live shots. You've touched on something quite interesting there, as you were indicating. I mean, this US accord to try and get something up and running with Saudi Arabia. Suggestions this may be a direct consequence of that, with Iran becoming involved, sponsoring, of course, as the United States would say, or at least broadly complicit in these Hamas attacks.
Yes, I mean, I think everyone knows that Gaza is not a happy place to live in. It's economically enormously challenged, a high degree of poverty, and yet they've got all these very sophisticated, very powerful missiles. Now, where did they get them from? The assumption is it's from Iran. So in other words, it's other states interfering and providing weaponry. They'd be much better off providing hospitals and universities. That would have been the thing. So it's a dire situation, and of course the future is bleak as well. And as we know from our own backyard here in Great Britain, from Northern Ireland, actually this doesn't achieve anything. The only way forward is going to be through negotiation.
We're just seeing pictures of more smoke. We've just seen pictures of armoured personnel carriers and other armoured vehicles massing at the border. Where do we go from here? Because we have these reports from the United States that there may be a ground incursion into Gaza. That presumably will escalate and brings into question what happens with Hezbollah in the north.
Yes, I mean, the future is only bad, certainly the immediate future. Because again, coming back to my point about pointless, it's not as if Gaza was occupied by the Israelis. Gaza was ruled totally by Hamas. They are in charge, and they've been in charge ever since 2005. So it's not an occupied country, nor is it, as it claims, cut off. There is a border with Egypt, so there is a free flow of goods and whatever to Egypt. So there was really no motivation for this sort of attack. It would have been much better to sit around a table and talk about a way forward. And of course, I have a lot of immigrants who are present, distraught, because a lot of Jewish people in this country have got family or friends out there. One, for instance, was going on Wednesday to a wedding. That's been called off because the groom is now being mobilized and doesn't know whether the wedding will take place. There's another friend whose nephew has just given birth to two twins, but he's not by the cot side. He's actually been called up to the front line. So this is an individual tragedy as well as a national one.
Indeed. I was going to ask you about the human cost of this, bearing in mind the scale of what's happened and, of course, the links between Britain and Israel. I guess many people are being directly affected by this.
Yes. We had a very large meeting, called a meeting at my synagogue in Maidenhead last night. It was overflowing. And people very concerned, both on the bigger overall picture, but also what's happening to individuals. For instance, one of the hostages that's being taken is an 85-year-old lady.
Yeah.
She was actually British originally. She married somebody who came to the UK in 1939 under the Kindertransport. She's nothing to do with the war and the conflict, but now she's a hostage somewhere in Gaza. This is not warfare. This is terrorism, and I can't see a way forward. And what makes this conflict different from previous conflicts is, there's been a usual pattern up to now, hasn't there? Hamas or Hezbollah has attacked, Israel has replied, and then eventually there's a ceasefire. This time, it's very hard to see a ceasefire taking place immediately. Plus, of course, the hostages means that there will be an ongoing crisis for a long time to come. And bearing in mind the size of Israel, the 700 people killed is roughly about 7,500 British people being killed here in England. What would we do if 7,500 British people were being killed? I think I've heard it said it's their 9/11.
Yes.
Well, it definitely feels that way. But on that point, I should stress that this is a political issue. It's not a religious issue. And I've been in contact with the local imam. We both said that, whatever happens in the Middle East, we're not going to import it here to Britain. There's no reasons why Jews and Muslims can't get on very well. In fact, going back to 9/11, when that happened, I went to the mosque and said a prayer for peace in Hebrew. The imam then came back to the synagogue and said a prayer for peace in Arabic. There's some parts of the world where you get shot for that, but we did it. It didn't change the world, but it was a clear message to our congregations here in Britain that we are going to try and solve the problems rather than inflame them.
Rabbi Jonathan Romain from the Maidenhead Synagogue, thank you very much for bringing us your thoughts here on GB News this afternoon. Thank you.